Welcome to the I Fired My Boss franchise podcast. My name's Dan Claps, founder and CEO of Franchise Playbook, a franchisor platform where we create, own, and operate dynamic franchise brands in the mobile services space. And my life's goal is to help people just like you fire their boss and become a business owner.
And I'm Christian Dadulak, top franchise consultant and co-founder of Real Franchising, a leading franchise consulting firm. And together, we're on a mission to help people fire their boss, hire themselves, and live the American dream through franchise ownership.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the I Fired My Boss podcast, formerly the Franchise Founders podcast, but we've since rebranded recently, as you may know, if you're a listener. And we're so excited to have our guest on today, Madeline Zook, multi-brand franchisee, serial entrepreneur. She's doing a ton of things while also running a marketing and just maybe busier than me, which is amazing. I'm so excited to learn about her background because she makes it seem like she's not busy at all in the 2 times we've spoken so far. But before we introduce her, I've got Christian Dadulak on. Hey, Christian, how are you?
Doing awesome, man. It's so weird to hear the I Fired My Boss podcast. I still just naturally want to say Franchise Founders because we've been doing that for so long, but I love it. Yeah, excited to be here. We have an amazing guest on that I think is just going to blow everybody's minds in terms of her level of experience within franchising, and super impressed even just from the conversations we were having before we started recording, and really excited to dig into it, Madeline. So less about me. Let's get into you, Madeline.
Cool.
Tell us about how you got into franchising.
Yeah. So like most people in franchising, I kind of fell into it. I played semi-professional basketball after college, and then started out as a marketing assistant, and got recruited over through basketball connections to what at the time was MaidPro franchising. Spent about a decade there. Eventually was the director of brands. We had about 9 brands, bought out by Riverside. During that time, I met my husband, who was a MaidPro franchisee, and we got married, and now we own 4 different franchise brands. We have a home cleaning, exterior cleaning, closets, and pest control, with 2 different franchisors, 3 kids, and about midway through the pandemic, I made the switch over to NetCertive. I'm the director of marketing. They're a digital marketing supplier for franchises. I figured I'm a Z, I'm a Zora, might as well try the supplier space. And now I'm just very interconnected with, teaching people correct ways to do franchising, marketing, development, and just kind of expanding my education and connections that way. So that's what I'm doing regularly, and wouldn't have it any other way.
It's funny because, again, we got connected not so long ago. And before recording, I was saying how it's amazing that we haven't met like in the franchise circuit before. But it's funny because as soon as we met, I feel like I keep getting pointed in your direction. Like I had posted something on LinkedIn around marketing, and like 4 or 5 people just said like to talk to you. They tagged you in the post and your companies. And Christian, what you don't know is Madeline didn't mention it yet, but she's a Voda franchisee too. She just doesn't know it yet.
Listen, I have a funny story after sure. My husband and I were at the IFA in 2021, maybe? Yeah. Or 2022. Yeah. And, we're out in one of the big fancy open bar dinners, and you figure you take your husband out to a franchise event, and someone comes over and goes, you need to go get your husband at the bar. And you're thinking, who's hitting on him? Who do I got to fight? Or like he had too many tequilas and I got to go get him. No. He was over there with his 40 brands about to sign an FDD like at midnight because he was like, this is a great franchise model. Let's just do it. 5 cheers. And I was like, so most people are, dealing with like the social aspect. I'm over here having to like wrangle in my partner from signing an FDD half in the bag. So I'm sure we'll have a Voda one of these days.
I love that. Yeah. Voda's all right. I'm just kidding. It's an amazing brand. Yeah. I know the founder. He's my friend. Well, let's get into that a little bit because it sounds like you don't do enough. It sounds like you have a lot of free time on your hands.
So much.
So you fell into franchising. How did you get involved with the first brand you said was MaidPro?
Yep. Yeah, so I came on as their like marketing coordinator, and at the time they had just split up their franchise development marketing and franchise consumer marketing. So I was kind of on the development side there for a while, helping build the brand, build up broker relations, all of that stuff. And then on the consumer side, I met my husband, and from there really learned what it took to be also on the franchisee side, building up a customer base. Where are the, what we don't call flaws, but features in the technology, and, where we can improve. And the CEO of MaidPro, Mark Kaczynski, he's a really good friend of ours, actually ended up speaking at our wedding, was really instrumental in helping us connect, where the deltas are in the support structure, because no longer was it just franchisees complaining about XYZ, or the franchisor complaining about franchisees. It was, you have a single person who you trust and see on both sides that can kind of help with those communications and development. So that was really fun.
And so with MaidPro, it sounds like you were already working for corporate, and so you learned a ton about the brand. You talked to franchisees. You met your husband.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how you got involved on that front. But was there anything else in terms of your selection process or criteria did you check out other franchises, or did you just, hey, I work with this brand, I know a ton about it, this is the one that I can see us winning with, and obviously you have your husband too. But was there any kind of selection process?
So yeah, my selection process for MaidPro was my husband. He already owned a whole bunch of those, so I kind of married into that.
I was at the IFE the year prior at the bar.
Yeah, no, that was like a decade before. But yeah, so he had that one, and then I was actually working on the brand internally. We built what at the time was called FlyFo, which was a mosquito tick control franchise from the ground up. This was before we were acquired. So through that process, I was then, we should probably buy one of these. If I'm building the brand and we know the system, why don't we take on one of the investments of being, one of those first 5 franchisees. So we did that. And then a couple years down the road, corporate acquired Men in Kilt, which is exterior cleaning. One of my good friends took over as like the COO, and I was still working there at the time. So I was seeing, numbers from the ground up, the ins and outs, and convinced my husband to buy that one. So we bought that one as well. And then most recently, I went out to lunch with Leo Goldberger from Home Based Franchise Brands, and he was talking to me about this new closet franchise that he was building. It was doing well. Brokers were buying into it, and if brokers are buying into it, it's probably a good brand, right? So from there, I was like, "That's it. I'm in. Send me an FDD." And he was really great, and we were able to work out a deal where we own a pretty large territory in Pennsylvania. So we're super excited to we're just a year in, and we're super excited to continue building that. So. While the selection process for me, I'm very type A, was just like, got it, good, go. We're trying to stay obviously relatively in the home services realm because our cross marketing fits really well together.
So that's pretty cool. So you go to lunch, like, and never probably thought you'd be a franchisee, nor did he. This is why, I was just telling to someone, I said, every networking I do, every single time works out. Every time. Yeah. You don't realize it at the moment. And I heard this quote, and it was like, billionaires actually network more than anyone. That's all they do is focus on networking. And there's a lot more to billionaires than just networking. But like one of the things is they network like crazy. Mm-hmm. And so had you not gone to that lunch, you never probably would have been a franchisee with them.
Exactly. I tell my kids, like, I would rather send you to a million interpersonal, communication skill classes than college at this point, just because it really seems like, your business is built on relationships.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we can have a whole discussion about that, I'm sure. But yeah, those soft skills are so critical, I think, with running a business. But okay, so you have the brands. So home services, there's a lot of cross-marketing potential. Would you, and it also sounds like you got in with some of these brands at a pretty early stage when they were still relatively emerging. So what is your thought process there? I mean, why an emerging brand versus something that's established? You had the relationships, you had the connections, but was there any fear there? Or what would you say to people that are looking at an emerging brand, or what's the case for emerging franchises and getting in early?
So I think that it depends on your goals and, quite frankly, your financial status, or not status, but your financial situation, I would say. A great thing about going into a bigger, stable business is there's more community support. They've pretty much seen anything that you've been through and can kind of help you out with that. Even if there's, a legal action or whatever, they've probably got the support system to either coach you through it, help support you financially, or, whatever it is. There's just more support and there's more proven structure. The good things about emerging brands is that you can really help build those operations and teach while doing, which I think is great. It's kind of like a rent to own situation. But again, it's probably going to come with more, I'd say, bumps in the road, a bigger investment, and a longer break even. So it took us, quite a few years to get our patio, which FlyFo was rebranded to Patio Patrol, but, turning a profit, because there was a lot of things that we just had to figure out on the fly. So it's important when you're picking your franchisees to pick those first 5 to 10, be very particular about them, because if you're just going to bring on anyone who will buy, there's a good chance that they could not be the right personality or financial fit during those times, where they could be, 2 or 3 years down the road. So, franchise 1 through 10 is not going to look the same as 10 through 50 and so on. So that's kind of what it takes for to be on the more emerging brand side. In terms of why we went, because we have two emerging, a mid and a large. And I would say with the emerging, we like to see the opportunity, and we're very good in terms of split roles in our marriage / co-ownership. So he is all operations and I'm marketing and sales. If I believe a brand can work, it's his job to make it go. And if he agrees that the infrastructure is there and, likes the culture and support system, then it's usually a green light there. So for the emerging brands, Causativity, we got opportunity to have a huge territory up front. And it's really on us to make that go. Being experienced franchisees, we had the confidence to do that and the patience to do that as well. We've got young kids. We're not moving anywhere, not traveling too much. So excited to do that. But I think the next brand we buy will probably be bigger, because it is a grind and a hustle and takes a little bit more to get it up and running. It's kind of like a newborn.
Yeah, it's interesting. Everything you said is like spot on. And I wish that I might take the snippet of this recording and put it at the beginning of our friend dev process, because, we're fortunate that the people that come to us for Voda have been identified that they're okay with an emerging brand. They tell their consultant or broker that, hey, I'm okay with emerging. And so they're coming to us already kind of knowing we're an emerging brand. But I always explain that there's pros and cons to everything. Emerging brand, lots of pros, lots of cons. And and same for an established brand. But the ability to be in a prime territory, to have unfettered, you mentioned you had lunch with the CEO of the brand, you have that unfettered access to the leadership team. You get to be a little bit more creative. There's just so many positives to being an early franchisee. But it's funny because I actually get on 25% of the Fran Dev calls I do myself, and the rest are with our team. But I get on and I explain to them, look, I delegated everything else in this business mostly so I could talk with you. Because for us, the first 15 people, really forever, but the first 15, if we make the mistake and bring on the wrong franchisee, we're dead in the water. And it's funny because people that are in the process, they don't realize that. They think well, I'm the one writing the check. And as they learn more about it, we're turning down, 40% of the people that come into our process get turned down, because it's I get that you're making an investment, but it's a lot more of an investment than you would think into each franchisee from a monetary standpoint. So that's great the way you look at it.
Yeah, it really is like a marriage, some people bring in more money, more assets, the different personality traits. But at the end of the day, my husband and I say, our FDD is more binding and more important than our marriage contract. So if it gives you an idea of, in terms of, bringing on the right person, it's a lot easier to get out of a marriage than an FDD. I'll tell you that.
That's funny. And ain't
That's
that
funny.
the truth? That's really true. Well, I think something that would be helpful for everyone to hear about, and something I'm interested in also, is just what does it look like when you first bought into the brand? I mean, obviously, your husband had the MaidPro franchises, right? But with some of the additional brands that you bought into, what did it look like when you first started it up? Like, what sort of challenges were you going through? Yeah, let's start there. What sort of challenges were you going through? What was it like early stage? What were you doing on a day-to-day basis? What did it look like?
Yeah, so I'll give you the key takeaways for each. Otherwise, I could talk for hours. But the MaidPro is great because I learned from the ground up about culture, the importance of culture. It's gotta, from the clients that you're servicing, the people you're employing, like, it matters. I've seen stories about the pros or the maids were cleaning, jumped in the pool and saved a kid's life. Like, up stories of that magnitude where you're saying, what we do is helping people. And that's kind of what the core of how I live my life, how my husband lives our lives, and how we want to, I would say, raise our franchises, raise our children, raise our franchises is with that nature in mind. And I'm sure that's a very common thing for most people. In terms of FlyFo, this is a funny thing where I was like, all right, I worked day in and day out on this marketing. And to the day, I still think that it's really great. But I said, all right, well, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. And if I really think this marketing is going to work, why don't I buy one and do it? Now, it's a little bit of a fail because, it got bought out and rebranded. There's a little bit more to that. I think, obviously marketing will work depending on the investment and operations and all of that you're going to put into it. But what I learned there is that, there is going to be a million different opinions on how to do something, how to market something, how you should, execute, if you should wait. And at the end of the day, one of the biggest takeaways is you have to get out and you have to do it, and you have to do it right. I don't care, if you make some mistakes. I don't care if the marketing is not perfect, but you can't kick the can down the road for forever, So that was kind of the biggest thing is, all right, well, you kind of build in the plane as we fly. We had just built this franchise system. We were franchisee, I think, number 2. And it was, well, it's mosquito season. And if we don't go right now, we're going to miss the whole season. So let's do it. Let's do it on the fly and figure it out. And being able to be kind of nimble and flexible was super important. When it came to Men in Kilts, it was an established brand. We had acquired the US rights. I was still on the franchisor team as well as in the franchise development process for being a Z. And it was very tricky to work through different countries. And that's only Canadian and American. There was a lot of rub there. It was, vendor prices. It was different in culture. It was, all of that. So it took a while to figure out how to operate independently from Canada. And then after we acquired the Canadian rights, also then coexist with a franchise community that is otherwise pretty split regionally. So what I learned there was, you have to know how to do things on your own as well as a unit, which you think in franchising is just obvious, but a lot of people come into franchising going, the franchisor will do it, my manager will do it. Well, if you can't get out there and do it yourself, if your support goes away, you obviously don't want your business to follow. So, that was important. And with Closetivity, that's brand new. But I think after lots of investment dollars and 4 brands now, I think it's safe to say that no matter what the item 7 says, no matter what the item 19 says, no matter what their franchise development, cost says, it's always going to be more investment than they say. It's just, whether it's a brand new territory or, the van breaks down, or, we rebrand the shirts, or whatever it is, you should probably always save an extra percentage for the stuff that you didn't account for, because when you have that little war chest there to work with, it makes things a lot less stressful, especially when you're in startup mode or, multi-brand mode.
I feel like everything's like that. Like when I was becoming a franchisor, I did a lot of research on what it would cost, and then I tripled it.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, it's going to cost this much. I was like, triple. And I'll tell you, double feels good, because if it ends up costing double, fine. But when you triple it, it's like, all right, I'm not saying you should do that with a franchise. That would be kind of crazy. But for me, it's like, all right, well, we tripled it. So even if we come in at double, we still have a third more to feel safe. And you're right, it takes away so much stress. But yeah, I agree. You always want, what's the number one reason people fail? Undercapitalized, right? So I have two questions for you. Mm-hmm. First one is there any difference between culturally, you have one brand that's owned by a larger conglomerate, bigger, and then you have one that's a little bit more of a smaller, more close-knit owner. Do you see any difference in the obviously, pros and cons again, but what are your thoughts there?
Yeah. So I went from MaidPro, which was privately owned. It's so cliche. People are like, oh, we're family. Blah, blah. These people were literally my family. I mean, I met my husband. They've spoken my wedding, all of this stuff. When we got bought out by Riverside and we're adding brand after brand after brand, it was great. There was a much bigger mentor knowledge base, a lot more, I would say cooks in the kitchen, but it's really minds at the table, because within franchising, it's less of a hierarchy and much more parallel communication lines, which was really great. But you do lose, no matter, which way you cut it, you lose a lot of that community feel, because it's no longer, I have a problem, I can call the owner and he'll help me fix it because he can make that call. It's a lot of, the corporate, I need approval, I need budget, we got to cut this, we got to cut that. A lot more bottom line, which took away from the community a lot, because not only was it people all of a sudden, I don't want to say losing support, but losing the personal touch. It was losing the personal touch and adding a ton of people. So all of a sudden it was we all just kind of drifted apart, which was a shame. And again, it's not something that's irreversible. It's on kind of the brand to pick back up where you left off. But no matter which way, like I said, which way you slice it, as a family gets bigger, relationships get harder to keep really close. So I would say there, it just became more corporate. It did. With the Closetivity, it is a much more intact. And now I've never worked for that franchisor, so I am a little bit on the outside. But you can tell now, we're kind of back to square one there, because they are just starting to build their community, starting to do, events or regional groups. And for me, it's kind of been there, done that. I'll see, I can foresee some bumps in the road. I can foresee which way it's going to go, or I wish they had this, I'll get there eventually. So it's kind of like we're in that gray zone of, we get a little bit piecemeal here or there. But yeah, I mean, the sweet spot only lasts for so long, and, nothing stays forever. So you have to figure out a way to build support and community regardless of size or, number of personnel.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. So something you said earlier was when you were working on the marketing for, I think it was FlyFo, you said, hey, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, right? And see how it pans out.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of people as a consultant where people have come to me or gotten referred to me. And these are, there you go. And there's been a lot of people that have come to me or gotten referred to me, or I've had conversations with someone at that I just met at a charity event or something like that. And it's crazy to me how many people, there's so many misconceptions, but some people think oh, wow, when I buy a franchise, do they set it up for me and I just buy it or whatever, and they run it or they take care of all the marketing? And I'm like, well, no, it's still a business and you have to be the one driving the business. I think there's a lot of misconceptions there. And I think a lot of people, you buy a franchise because of the support and vendor relationships and the network and the mentorship, and you're buying a blueprint. But at the end of the day, you have to be the one to execute on that blueprint. You are the it factor. You're the driver of the business. But having said all of that, I am curious what your perspective is in terms of the support that you actually do get from the franchise. And every franchise says, we have the best support ever. We have the best franchisee validation ever. We have the best marketing support, done for you marketing. It's handled. How much of that have you found to be true? And obviously with some of these brands, you've come from the franchisor side, but how much has your experience been in terms of how much support have you actually received? And what did that support look like? What has been the most valuable support that some of these franchises have offered to you?
So whenever someone says, we have great support, we validate so well, I just say, prove it. Prove it. Because, that proof is in the pudding. I think support, and I'm going to ruffle some feathers here, but I think support is subjective because it really depends on the person or that disc profile, that person, whatever your persona, because you could have your entrepreneur persona like myself, and I got it good. I don't need, the everyday phone calls. I can problem solve. I can figure it out. But when I want support, I need it now, or I need you to listen when I find inefficiencies or a great technology that'll help. And, that's kind of what I would consider support. Whereas other people kind of want the daily phone calls. They need walking through QuickBooks. They want you to be there when they have a poor client call. And a lot of times, coaches end up becoming therapists. So, some people would classify support that way. So I think it really depends on who you are. But regardless of who you are, the franchisor, if they know exactly the personas they're bringing on for franchisees, they need to be able to support each one. So when they go and market and sell in franchise development, they're looking for your entrepreneurs, your veterans, your retirement, looking for a second job. It's not only their job to know where they are, why they'll buy, who they are, what they want, but they also need to know how to support them, what they're looking for, what their love language is, for instance, because that being able to understand and fulfill that on a long-term basis is a great way to kind of practice what you preach in terms of wanting them to do that for their clients. If you want to increase the lifetime value of a customer, provide great service, get to know them, add additional services, refer them, all of that. If you're preaching to them to do that, then you need to do that for them as well. Support structures, coaches, everything is kind of a revolving door in franchising because your needs change with every, growth or additional service or new franchisee. But again, whoever you have in your system, you need to know how to support them. Now, that's easier said than done. I think, with our smaller franchisor, that's definitely something that needs to expand. And with our large franchisor, that's something that needs to be a refocus, because I think that oftentimes when you're on the building, you become so overwhelmed. And I'm sure you know this, Dan, ingrained, and there's just so much to do and so much opportunities. There's not enough time in the day. And then as you get so big, all of a sudden everything revolves around the bottom line, and you lose the core of what's really building that revenue, which is people, which is your franchisees. It is your customers. It is your employees. So being able to always kind of refocus back to that, I would say is the most important, and something that I'm looking forward to both our franchisors continuing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I definitely am a growth-oriented CEO. I'm always thinking about growing and obviously keeping a great profit margin. But usually, when you start cutting anything around the people, it's always a short-term win, and it's a long-term detriment, and you lose people, and they leave. And I never really understand it, because you see it every time, a new owner comes in, cut this, cut that. And it's like the 20 grand you spent on that a year was attributing to all of this revenue that you can't really quantify. I don't know. I think that I'd rather grow than cut, but obviously still being effective and efficient with P&O. But so I have a question for you. You've learned a ton, multiple businesses, you're really super experienced, but like, what was like the fire my boss moment? Like, what was like the decision, like, I'm done working for someone else and like, that's it. Like, what was that moment for you?
So, March 2020, right? Pandemic starts. Two of my three children are stepkids. So at the time I didn't have my own. I was, dating my now husband, and he had two kids, and I came down to visit for a weekend and just, hey, what's going on? See the kids, see him. And then the pandemic happened and my flights got canceled, and I was in Boston at the time and I was visiting in Philly, and the whole pandemic came crashing down and I never went home. So all of a sudden I went from, I have a boyfriend who has two kids and a couple states away, to holy shit, I'm a stepmom to two kids and I now live with a husband, two kids, and two dogs. And I have a full-time job. So I think that was the moment that I realized very quickly, I want to be around for all of the moments, but I still want to have a career in franchising and being a franchisee focused first. Obviously, I also work in corporate, but being a franchisee and quote unquote, firing my boss, who was also my franchisor, was, I said, this is it, because I need to, at the time the kids were 1 and 3. So it was, I need to help make the daycare runs. I want to help cook, and I want to, I don't want them to always see their new stepmom walking out the door in a business suit and coming home after they go to bed. So I would say that was my moment.
That's awesome. And so it's funny because you say, currently I work with corporate now. I have these different franchises. I'm sure there's people that are listening to this thinking like, how do you do that? How do you manage it? And yet you still have time to come on here during the middle of the day and hop on a podcast. You have your own podcast, which we can touch on.
Yeah.
How do you manage it all? I mean, what does your day-to-day typically look like now? Obviously you have the infrastructure in place with your teams and whatnot, but what does it look like, and how did you get to that point?
Yeah, so it's a little crazy right now because our third child is 10 weeks old, so very much in newborn stage. I would say that the biggest advice I can give is a couple things. One is don't, over or just simply glorify being busy. I think people love, I'm so busy. And at the end of the day, busy means that there's always going to be something that's not getting as much attention as you'd like to give. On that, it's understanding that the balance between family and work is never even. If it is even, it's fleeting, because if you're doing great at work, chances are you think you're a sucky parent. If you're crushing it as a parent, chances are there's a million emails that aren't being answered. So understanding that balance is just a constant seesaw, and that's okay. Third would be that it really does take a village. I have a terrific support structure. I have great friends, great neighbors, great family. So, that's also super, super helpful. And being able to say yes to help and ask for help is necessary, especially coming from someone who does not. Little Miss Independent over here. And then I would say after that, you really have to prioritize. It took me a long time to realize that the to-do list is never to done, if you will. It's just, there's always something you can add. And I started to phrase it as, just try to get 2 or 3 things done off the list. But that doesn't mean you failed or you can never do that, or it's just being more realistic with timelines, and then prioritizing, what's most important, what's going to be most satisfying, whether it's, your bills, your family, your work first. Once you're done with that, then everything after that's a bonus.
This is like gold, what you're saying. Because it's funny. I've never had as much going on as I have going on. Mm-hmm. And I used to not understand certain people I looked up to. Like, I'm all about being responsive. I answer everybody, but I actually think it's people that have never ran a company a certain size will say like, oh, you have to get back to everyone. I physically cannot get back to everyone. Like,
No, yeah, it's
I
impossible.
don't, it's not, I'll have a missed call. And if it's not related to like my most important things for the business, I just don't call back. And it doesn't mean I don't like that person. Like family, it's like I can only see you.
Yeah, missed text messages like right now.
But I'm saying like, and it's like I wake up and I say to myself, like, I only can do this. Even if you worked every minute of the day, there's only so much you can do. And so I don't let anything, and people think I'm rude now because I'm like, look, I'm sorry. If it doesn't affect the 10 things I have that are so important this day today, I can't have that talk. And like, I can't help you right now. I used to be in a position where I could like do more like coaching or mentoring. It's like, I will again, but right now I'm just not in that position. So it's interesting because what you just said about like, you're basically never going to be winning at all three: family, health, work at once, and just accept that. I really like that.
Yeah, and right now, I would say right now my win factor is like work, parenting, and then health. Like for instance, this morning I was like, oh damn, this Arnold Palmer's really hitting. It wasn't until 3 hours later I realized that shit was spiked. No wonder it felt so good. So, health is not doing so good, but just understanding that life's a balance.
And you can't, and you have to put them all. I actually just made this. I lost not to keep talking about me, but I lost the gym once we launched in April. And Coral, my girlfriend was like, you can't like just not work. What are you not going to work out for the next 3 years? Like it's going to be hard for the next 3 years. What are you just not going to do anything else? And so like I made a new rule. Now it's that like not every day, but when I do work out, it's like that's the first thing before I do anything else because otherwise it's never going to happen. But yeah, you're balancing family. It's a lot.
Well, I mean, what I've also has been a huge help to me is two things. One, my husband and I, we rate our days 1 to 10. If you're under a 5, like then it's like, do you need support or do you need problem solving? Do you want me to sit there and be like, here's a beer and you need a back massage, or do you need me to be like, how do we fix this hiring that's wrong? If it's above a 5, that's great. We're having a good day. And then after that is just, it's too hard to split family time and work. I notice that like when I'm with my baby and trying to like, it's my turn to do all of that and watch her and hold her. If I'm constantly thinking about work, it's taking away from it, even though I can't do anything about it. So I try to just be like, nope, now is family time. I have to shut it off. And then of course, if we have a nanny for while I work during the days, I'm like, nope, she's okay. This is my work. I don't need to, worry about that stuff. So that doesn't work for everyone, but it definitely works for me because the constant back of the mind pull I find is much more draining than just going all in on what you're focusing on.
I love what you said about rating your day. I'm going to start doing that because I think it's a good gauge. And obviously it's, it's subjective and whatever, but that is entirely the point though, because it's how you're feeling about your day. Mm-hmm. And, man, I love that. I think that's just such a smart thing, a smart way to do it because am I on track or am I not on track? And then it's a good way to communicate to the people and the support systems in your life, how you're doing. So I love that. I'm going to steal that.
A lot less fighting. It's a lot less fighting. I'll tell you that.
So within your franchise businesses, I mean, obviously now you have a 10-week-old. I'm sure that takes a lot of time. But what is your involvement in the franchise look like on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis? Is it, meeting with managers? You said you work more on the sales and marketing side. What does that typically look like? I know you said your husband works more on the ops side, operations. So what does that look like? And, obviously now it looks a lot different than when you first got involved in the franchises, I'm sure. But what does that look like?
So my job now is to manage the marketing, and we have it interesting because we have a large agency that handles the marketing through the franchisor for one of our brands. We have NetSertive, which is who I work for, which is a smaller digital marketing company for another brand. We have in-house for one brand and then in-house for another brand. So we see it from all different sides. I say in-house for one of our brands. I mean, we also are like partners with a digital marketing agency. here locally. So we see it from all different sides. So my job now is to kind of manage all of those, make sure we're hitting benchmarks. For the most part, we know what we should hit, and I understand the marketing landscape thoroughly enough that I understand the spend and the avenues in which it needs to come from. And if it's not hitting, then it's my job to figure out why. And then it's a lot of helping on the day-to-day in terms of, whether it's literally in the weeds of washing $1 million kilts because our window washers need their kilts washed professionally, or it's, trying to figure out how to mend a hiring structure, or what is a way that we can get health benefits for our managers, that sort of thing. So it's much more holistic on what we call it our Zook Industries. So Zook Industries is the brand of all four of our little mini portfolio of brands, much more holistic rather than, deep into it. But just as it comes on, rating your days 1 through 10, a lot of the times there is a brand that has a fire that needs to be put out. And very rarely when there is not a fire, it's okay, which brand needs the most love right now, which, I won't lie, it's difficult to have 2/3 emerging mid-sized brands because it's like having triplets, and then, the older one doesn't get as much love, even though they're the biggest money maker, and that's where you should be investing your time. So it's a very big push or pull. But again, my roles really are just making sure that our portfolio is staying on track, and I can help in terms of driving those revenue and sales to where they need to be. So operationally, we can support, a bigger infrastructure as we grow.
Dan, go ahead.
No, I love that. Well, what if someone wants to get in touch with you? How can they do that?
Probably the easiest way is to just show up at my door with a pizza. No. LinkedIn, probably the best way. That's, where I'm on most of the time in terms of communication. And then of course, through one of our brands, we're in Ambler or, greater Philadelphia area, or through NetSertive or through you guys. I'm pretty much always available and never available. You get that, Dan.
Makes a ton of sense. Yeah, and you do have the what is your podcast called again?
I have a podcast called The Art of Franchise Marketing. So what we do is it's through NetSertive where I work, and we interview brands and we talk about what's working, what's not working in the world of franchise marketing, both consumer and development, and see if we can't find, continuing trends and, start not only giving the brands, some awareness and some insight into kind of what's going on behind the curtain, but also, connecting executives and brand leaders from those brands with each other.
I love it. So basically, once Dan and I help someone buy the right franchise for them, we can send them to you so they can get their marketing dialed in.
Exactly. We'll help them out.
That sounds awesome.
That's awesome.
Well, cool. Well, Madeline, this has been awesome. Thanks so much for taking the time to come on and share your insight. I know that this is valuable for, I'm sure, franchisors, franchisees, people that are thinking about becoming franchisees. So super appreciate your time. I'm sure we'll have you back at some point because there's so much more we could ask you about, I'm sure. But thanks, everyone, again, for tuning into another episode. Make sure to subscribe, leave a review, share it, all that good stuff. And we'll see you on the next episode of the I Fired My Boss franchise podcast.
Thank you, guys.
You're f***ing fired. If you want to say those words to your boss, make sure you head on over to ifiredmybosspodcast.com and fill out the form to schedule a no-cost consultation. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend who might also want to fire their boss.